All right, everybody. Welcome to the Detroit Hustle Podcast. I am your host, Melinda B. Powers, and today we are going to be talking to Matthew Goins. Now, Matthew, I know him from high school. He is a really great guy. He's a musician at the time. I know he took health class with Miss Doherty.
Ooh.
She was like the oldest lady teacher in the school. But we go way back. And he has evolved into a really great family man. He's a business owner now, and he's doing something really special with that. And I'm going to let him talk about it. So, Matt, take it away. Introduce yourself to the audience.
Hey, thanks for having me on. And please don't give me credit for being a musician. I played in the band, but being in a marching band it does not always require musicianship. Not to play in the drum section. I don't deserve credit for being a percussionist, but I played in the band though.
You played those cymbals though.
Yeah, I did that, but that don't give me a check box as a musician because if
All
you
right,
put a
fine.
sheet music.
Okay.
But my background, hey, I'm from Detroit, so that's the alignment with the podcast. From the West Side, so I grew up in Rosedale Park.
Okay.
The schools I went to were, I went to Christ the King, with the Catholic elementary school. Eventually transitioned to Ludington Middle School, then Cass Tech for high school. And we just had a fantastic time growing up in Detroit. I'm one of four children, so we had a medium to big size family, and my mom's from Detroit. My father's from Michigan, more of a rural environment. But we're Michiganders, and we had a great time living and developing in Detroit.
Awesome. So give us, I kind of talked about what you're into now. The big thing that you're doing is called Puzzle Huddle, correct?
Yeah, I have a wonderful opportunity where just in parenting, I'm now the parent of three children. I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old. And somewhere in that process, it's busy. I'm 3 car seats. Like when I pull up,
Wow.
there's 3 car seats in the back, Cheerios on the floor, Goldfish, Cheez-Its, and every other thing that's a synonym with having a lot of babies.
Uh-huh.
And somewhere in the process of having those kids, I got inspired to just develop and engage in ways where I was going to play with them. And my kids are really into jigsaw puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
But somewhere in searching for toys and products to put in front of them, I couldn't find any African-American puzzles. So we started on a journey where first it started with a sheet of cardboard, and I was trying to cut puzzles for myself. And that evolved and developed. And through several iterations, I now have a puzzle company, and we feature largely diverse characters on our jigsaw puzzles.
That is awesome. So this was just, and it's usually that way when people come up with ingenious products, it's usually to solve a problem. So I like that you had that approach. So give us, since you're there now, let's go back. You've given us your background. You've given us where you're at now. Fill in that gap there. How did you get from Cass Tech playing the cymbals to now family man with a puzzle company?
Well, from Cass Tech, I was offered a scholarship to attend Howard University. So I went from Detroit to Washington, D.C., 4 years in undergrad at Howard. I got a degree in marketing.
Mm-hmm.
At that point in my life, I wasn't, the next phase of that was usually a corporate America kind of job. My disposition then was just I was not interested in going to sit in somebody's office for 8 hours of my day, or that's all I perceived to be were my options.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't ready for that because I liked the social freedom to move about during the day. So I re-enrolled in Howard to get a graduate degree in communications.
Okay.
After that, they offered me a position. The timing just worked out wonderfully where I was able to get a full-time job at the university. So I moved into a career that I thought was going to be my lifetime career in student development and student affairs. And I worked at Howard sponsoring the student organizations, the Greeks, the yearbook, the newspaper, all the student clubs and organizations. And I did that for several years before I eventually re-enrolled a third time in the Howard and got a third degree in an MBA with emphasis in human resources.
Oh, okay.
So
They
10
couldn't
years
get
later,
rid
my
of you,
disposition.
huh?
Yeah, but it was just so much fun there wasn't a good reason to go do something else.
Okay.
But 10 years later, maturing a bit differently and wanting maybe a different income opportunity for myself, I was a little more ready to go do corporate America. So I took my MBA and I went into corporate America, and that's largely what I've been doing since. Somewhere in that window, I got married, and the three babies happened as well. So
Okay. And so you do work in
lots of
human
cool things.
resources, or what kind of jobs have you?
Yeah. Well, after this professional time in higher education, my next really employment opportunity was as a human resource professional. So it is not what a lot of people assume it to be at the professional level, not in the U.S., not,
Hmm.
pushing paychecks and helping employees understand their W-2s. It's organizational design, it's organizational development, it's establishing culture for corporations, hiring strategies, pay strategies. So it's big macro solutions for a company. I've been doing that in tech for the last 10 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's pretty awesome. Like, so what made you want to go that route? Was it your time at Howard where you got that time to figure out what you really wanted to do? Was it a shift from doing the student development work? Like, what set you on that path?
When I have self-reflection time, it's really the same career path. It's just a different environment. So I went from Howard, where I was advising student clubs and activities, organizations, and how to help them have good outcomes and achieve their goals in a university setting. It's the same skill set. It's just changing the customer. So I now do in my head largely the same thing, but it's in the corporate environment. It's still teams, development, um, partnering, collaboration. It's just Fortune 500 instead of education.
Right, right. Well, that's pretty cool. So you found your niche, even though it wasn't where you thought you were going to end up for life, essentially, as a career.
Yeah, I just love it. I love teams, collaboration, people, development, learning. Those are just things that if I'm walking down the street, those things might be on my mind without any other prompt.
Wow. Now that I didn't know about you, that's interesting. Well, I think you always struck me as a team player. I mean, even in the band, like the drum section is like a big family. So was it kind of there that was happening already, or that's just how you've always been?
Wow, I never thought of band as, but sure, it's an organization.
Mm-hmm.
Each section might be a team. There's
Mm-hmm.
some leadership development. There's definitely some collaboration and uh, personnel issues and interpersonal. So there's lots of
Discipline.
there's leadership challenges, there's discipline, you got turnover, you got
Uh-huh.
onboarding new employees or new band members, you got your craft process.
Uh-huh.
So I guess if somebody wants to write a thesis or a dissertation on band as an organization and apply all the organizational theory to do an analysis, I'm sure it would be eye opening to understand all the nuances of org development and change with the marching band as
Right.
the subject.
Definitely. And then I have to say this just because I can. I'm the host. So unfortunate that you went to Howard because we all know FAMU is the best HBCU on the planet.
I don't agree with you, but I had a good night. I did take my road trip, so I've been on campus at FAM for
Uh,
homecoming. I had a good time down there, and I've seen the band and a very impressive marching band there. So and
mhm.
I applied to FAM, so it's not I don't discredit
Okay.
FAM as an awesome university. It's a wonderful school, and I even applied. But I was
Oh,
supported with a scholarship to go to Howard, and I had an older brother at Howard at the time, so I made a different decision. But I'm a fan of FAMU University.
that's sweet. Thank you so much for not being the typical rival. That's awesome. And then you also told me before we got started that all of your siblings went to Howard, correct?
Yeah, I'm one of four children, so the medium-sized family, but all of us were just very fortunate. We were all granted scholarships, and we all attended Howard University. So my brother, older brother before me, and then my two younger sisters follow me. Now, all four of us were never there at the same time, but maybe I was there with my two younger sisters at some point, and all three of us were there together after my brother graduated and moved on.
Okay, cool. And so, in talking about that, so you got a legacy there. Are you going to influence your kids to go as well?
So my parents they met and graduated from Michigan State. So my along the way, my parents didn't put any, attention in the system to try to encourage me to go to Michigan State. So I would not probably want to do that for my children. But there's going to be some presence that is going to be hard for them to avoid. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
talk about Howard a lot, and if and they'll have other family members that have attended. So without maybe not direct pressure, but there's definitely going to be some influencing based on just awareness, conversation, and significant stakeholders that all have an association with this university.
Okay, that makes sense. That's fair. I think that's fair. Give them a choice, but give them a little push.
Yeah, I learned what's interesting about having kids is you learn that they're just not you. So all the things that you want for them to be and do and experience the world, the children they won't have the same life experience to that. So what was very compelling for me coming out of CAST that I wanted to embrace, it just won't be true for them. They'll have a different life experience and different things will matter. So I can't just say, look here, my money, if I'm cutting a check, it's going to Howard. If
Right.
you find your own money to go somewhere else if you want to go. No, gotta let them babies have designed their own lives. So
Hmm.
we'll see when it comes.
Well, you just sound like a very balanced parent. That is so impressive.
But we try. It's all there's no class, so you just make a lot of this stuff up. You just got to make it up when you get to it.
Well, I'm going to take some tips and pointers for when it's my time. But I want to also ask you, since we're on family and you have mentioned a lot about family, um, would you say that the going through the experience with the Puzzle Huddle business is that made much richer for you because your family it was a direct motivator and is involved? Like, what does that mean to you as a father, as a man, and as an entrepreneur? Like, how does that kind of shape how you feel and how you are, I guess, how intentional you are about the business?
Well, to maybe if I could kind of stitch together the anchors of influence. So I'm from Detroit. I went to
Mm-hmm.
Howard. So I've always been very deep in minority environments. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, Detroit at the time was 90 something percent African American. Howard equal percentage. So that's been my life experience. It's very cultural and embracing African American culture.
Mm-hmm.
My mom's a teacher, so super hands-on in the dining room, at the kitchen table, learning, it, you know, homework, books, blocks, just and all sorts of flashcards and just every learning device that a teacher would have access to know about. We had all of those things. So she was very hands-on in terms of our education and development. So a lot of that stuff I think came back out of me. The association with culture, the intuition towards learning and being hands-on with your children. When I evolved into fatherhood, uh, my mom and dad were just super connected and spent a lot of time with us. And that's it's not just legacy, it's present. That's what I was observing of my peers, the people that were starting in fatherhood along with me. I
Mm-hmm.
watched them on social media. I watched them being super connected to their kids, like not
Mm-hmm.
not distant or evade, like at the park, in the living room, just very hands. At least what was being shared through social media.
Right.
So my history, and then then what I was currently perceiving, that connection really inspired me that no, if to do fatherhood is to do it very present and connected, and pulling together all the talent and capabilities and creativity and making all of that available to my children while I was engaging with them as a parent.
Well, that is so awesome. I got like the warm fuzzies. I know everyone listening is like, wow, that is so great that you have that perspective. And I mean, could, and again, this is why I do this podcast because there are certain perceptions and stereotypes out there about the city of Detroit, about people that come from there. And I just think it's so refreshing to hear the voice of an African American male that is so family oriented and just really dedicated to his family and then to other people. Like, you're just the shining example of something that we don't always get to see and hear about. So I'm just super excited that you're here and you're just giving us all these gems. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and thank goodness for your podcast as a platform, because one of the things I kind of got frustrated with, or I saw it as an opportunity, is the narrative of the Black father just isn't. I don't think it shows the range of reality.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Detroit, so good bad perception, Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
But I grew up. A lot of my friends had their fathers, and their fathers came to our softball games and went to Boy Scouts and participated as a band parent. Then when I matured into fatherhood, I was with a bunch of dads that were all with their kids. So what the media would have told me was the reality of Black fatherhood. Now, maybe I've just been blessed and isolated, and I've only been exposed to the goodness, but I just don't think that's true. I think the counter story isn't being told. I think Black fatherhood is actually very vibrant in lots of communities, and the dads are present and creative and doing lots of cool things with their kids.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. I see a lot of that in my friends and family. So I would tend to agree. It's just, we know how the media works. People put out what they want people to see. So it just depends on who is the one disseminating. So now we're going to shift into the more Detroit-oriented section of the interview. And I want you to tell me, in your experience, what makes the D so special? I know you talked a little bit about that, but if you could tie that back into your direct influences, whether it's certain people that contributed to your evolution, places, experiences, but just how did the D influence you, and what makes it so special in how it influenced you?
Detroit, it's just a wonderful place. Even though I went to all primarily African American schools, interesting thing about my neighborhood, growing up in Rosedale Park, my block was actually very diverse. My core playmates in my neighborhood were not African American. Paul and Jeremy were, if they ever hear this, Paul and Jeremy were Black, and that's who I ran and played freeze tag with every day after school.
Mm-hmm.
So very diverse, but then also Detroit has kind of a grit and resilience, and that association with the automotive industry. And when you get out of Detroit, there's a bit of a underdog quality. So when you say you're from Detroit, usually the response at the time was, "Ooh, what's that like being from Detroit?" and it's actually wonderful. But I'm glad. It's interesting that you might discount that I've been through some hardship because I'm from Detroit. It's actually great, but thanks for not thinking I'm up to much. I'm actually up to a lot.
That's a good way to flip it. Yeah, I usually get have you ever been robbed or shot? I'm like, what? No, never. And I walked the streets. No. I took the bus. I was perfectly fine. Nothing ever happened to me. So
I never had a violent. School kids are school kids. So there's some rough housing and some that kind of stuff. But no, I never had like a gun incident in Detroit. I didn't have any exposure experience with guns until I got to college. And DC was actually I had some more safety issues in DC than I ever had in Detroit.
I can imagine that. And I always say too, any major city is going to have its problems. I mean, people, it's dirty. Like, have you been in New York? I mean, come on. It's a downside for everywhere. So I've been kind of like battling for Detroit since I left, because, coming down to Florida, like Tallahassee is not, so when I came to school in Florida, I only associated Florida with like Disney World and South Beach. And Tallahassee is very country. It was like, they call it Southern Georgia. And it's just like, I think I saw a horse in someone's backyard. I just didn't know what was going on. Like, that was culture shock for me. But even in that, I met people from all over, and it still was like, I was constantly defending Detroit, and it hasn't stopped. When I tell people where I'm from, it's like, oh, like you said, and it's just really discouraging. I have a different response to it now, but again, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing here. All right.
I would put Detroit in my high school against anybody's high school. Like please, please. Like Cass Tech, show me. Show
Right.
me what school was better than that. Pick what city and just pick.
Exactly. And it's funny too. I have had incidents where I'm explaining like the schools, like, you know, how we had curriculums in high school, like essentially college majors, and they're like, you went where? Where was this? And it's like Detroit, Michigan. You know, I went to Bates and Cass. Those are like two of the best schools in the city, and they were
Now
public.
Bates, I don't know what they put in the ground at Bates, but Bates had a special thing. I didn't go, but there's something happened at Bates, because that is a network of people that went to elementary and middle school together.
Yes.
That are still all connected. Like
yes.
That network is like so vibrant. It's like it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do your elementary school mates are still your crew?
And it's so funny.
Chris,
that it's amazing. Well, because I will say, for me personally, because a lot of us went from K to 8, I feel like those are like cousins. They're like family to me. We grew up together. So I was actually, for my class, I'm responsible for all the reunions we've had over the last, I don't know, 15 years or so. It just felt like my duty.
Shout out to everybody.
Yeah, you came to one.
Everybody that went to Bates, like, and I went to college with a bunch of Bates people. Like, shout out to Bates.
Right,
something was going on that was insane at Bates, and it was a good thing.
And a few of our guests so far, well, I think a couple of our guests so far are alum from Bates too, and there's some more to come, because it's tons of us. But yeah, it was a very, very unique. I've never heard of a similar type of school, and we were so fortunate. Like you were saying, the fact that we grew up in a majority African American city. That school was like a little microcosm of that, in that we were getting this like phenomenal education, and going out and going to college and hearing people talk about the things they didn't learn. And I'm like, what? You didn't know that? We learned that back in 3rd grade, you know? So it's like, we had a really great, I'm just pumping up Bates. I'm supposed to be talking to you. So let's get back on track. Now we're on the last part. This is the fun part. This is the Fab Five. So, of course, the play on the Michigan team of old. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. These are Detroit-oriented questions, and you give me your best answer. I like to be able to trip people up a little bit sometimes. I haven't been super successful in that, but, you know, we get some hesitation, and I think that's fun. So, number 1, your favorite Detroit place or landmark?
It's probably, okay, it's going to be unconventional. My favorite landmark is probably Grand River Avenue, like the whole thing.
Really? Explain.
And that's because, so I rode the public bus to Cass, and, you know, we live pretty deep west. Mm-hmm. So it's a 45-minute bus ride on Grand River, one bus from my house to get to Cass Tech. So I rode 45 minutes on the bus each way every day at high school. Well, for the most part. So it's just steeped in such memory of the journey from my home to Cass Tech, and looking at all the landmarks on the way, and looking how, you know, the businesses evolved and the intersections evolved, like Grand River and Schaefer, and you got Grand River and Livernois, and Grand River and the Boulevard, and you get Grand River and these major intersections all the way downtown, and just watching the city change over time. Like I can pick up such a history lesson and know the pulse of the city. If I just make that ride down Grand River, shoot, that tells me a lot of what I need to know about what's going on in Detroit at the time.
That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, that's major too. You spent a lot of time on that bus.
For 45 minutes from my door to get to downtown. So,
right.
Yeah,
wow.
It's a long ride, but very informative.
Yeah, that's a very unique answer. Hadn't heard that one, but thank you for that. That was really cool. All right. Moving on to number 2, your favorite Detroit restaurant or dish, past or current?
Dish, I'm gonna make this a dish. Some better made chips.
Okay.
Look, them red hot better made chips. like that's $1 billion recipe. I don't know what they sprinkling on them chips, but if I had some of them chips today, it's like that powder they put on them chips that's priceless.
All
That's
right.
like the
Anybody heard
recipe for
that?
Pepsi.
Send that man a care package.
That's a good chip. Look, today that's a good chip right now.
So the red hot better make. Yeah, I'm not a spice connoisseur by any stretch, so that's not my forte. But for those of you that are, check them out. Better made chips are classic. That's classic Detroit. Classic. All right. So we're gonna move on. Number 3. Your favorite Detroit downtown event, and that can include festival, fireworks, parade, auto show, but it must be strictly downtown only.
There's so many of them. We used to have so much fun, but it will probably be one of the events at Hart Plaza. So the African American Festival, the African Festival, and just there's one thing that just stands is like all the African jewelry and the statues. And then I remember the T-shirts at the time. There was something about Black culture that got really into these Bart Simpson style, African American characters. And like everybody had one. And they were, I don't know if they were probably $10 or something, probably just low cost T-shirts, but it was like the current pop culture local thing to have.
Right.
So one of them festivals and T-shirt shopping for my newest Black Bart Simpson shirt.
You had a collection, huh?
Yeah, I think everybody did. But that was the cool thing at the time.
Right. I got you. I got you telling our age, but that's okay. All right. So we're going to move on to number 4. Your favorite Detroit sports team.
It is. Being from Detroit, we were kind of privileged because over 20 years, we've had great sports teams. If it's, like the 90s version of the Pistons and like the last 15 years with the Red Wings and a little older school, but the quality of the Tigers, we've kind of been fortunate to have good sports teams across the board. But if I have to pick one, it's probably because I have this championship memory. It's either going to be the Red Wings or the Pistons because when I was in the early 90s, like we were right in the middle of, those back-to-back championships and the insanity and the energy associated with the Pistons. So if I got to pick my top team, it's probably the Pistons because I had those championship memories.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you do the parades?
Well, I don't think I got a chance to go to the parade, but the energy just took over the city. It was them bad boys T-shirts and you knew all the names, the Bill Lambiers, Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, Benny. It was just Dennis Rodman. Like it was a great time in the city, especially for our sports.
Rick Mahorn. I remember because I went to the first parade. Me and my mom went, and I remember that day. If I'm not mistaken, when they were celebrating at the Palace, they found out they were trading Rick Mahorn, and we were like, "What?"
Yeah, it was something like that.
It was kind of weird. Like, we're celebrating. What are you doing? And I'll never forget that moment. I've been very attached to Pistons myself. I am, I'm a girl, so I'm a little emotional about my sports. So when they're not doing well, I just can't watch. It's too painful. I took like a whole 13-year hiatus from basketball after they lost to the Bulls. I didn't watch them again until they got good again with Ben Wallace and all those guys. It's just too hard.
Yeah, they came back.
Yeah, but I did watch that. I was all into that. And then when they lost to the Spurs, I was done. I just haven't bounced back.
Yeah, so it's the kind of franchise that has its, every couple years they come back and it's a good team to participate with.
We're waiting for the next turnover, I guess. I haven't really been keeping up with them, but I'll always root for them. That's that's the home team. All right.
Yeah.
So now here we are. We are at the last one. Number 5. Your favorite Detroit memory. And what I mean by that is that for you, this is a memory that's so Detroit, you can't classify it as anything else.
Oh, well, I like to go to the mall whenever I get home. Gosh, I give you multiple answers, but I'm gonna try to make them fast to fit the time.
Okay, that's fine.
I love going to the mall because Detroit fashion is just unique. It's its own kind of utopia of fashion. So back in the late '90s, like the shearling jackets and the Gore-Tex boots, and it was like this is the like everybody's uniform. Like this is what we're all wearing. Like so, it just feels so Detroit. The fingernails, and then you go to the mall and you get to see the stores that are selling, the pink gaiters, the baby blue gaiters, and the suits that match. So walking through the mall in Detroit just gives you a sense of just like local, like this is killing it.
Right.
And it's like, and Detroit killing it. Like this might not play the same way in Chicago, Atlanta, New York, but this plays like this you're winning here when you have this on.
Right.
So those are super Detroit memories, probably more event focused. I had a chance to see in high school. I went to see the Kings of Comedy at Cobo Hall.
Oh, wow.
And that was back when the Kings of Comedy were like, that was the show touring. And it was Bernie Mac, it was Steve Harvey, it was Cedric the Entertainer. I think Joe Torre was on the tour as well at the time. But it was just, and D.L. Hughley. But it was like the best. And it was at Cobo, and it was just so Detroit. It was so Detroit.
I can only imagine.
and then probably a more current one. I had a chance to, a couple years ago, I ran the Detroit Free Press Marathon.
Okay.
And that's 26 miles around the city. And that gave me an opportunity to just see a version of Detroit that I had just never. I ran through neighborhoods that I just wouldn't have had reason to run, to be on the block in those neighborhoods. So 26 miles running up and down the streets of downtown Detroit just gave me a different perspective of different characteristics and pockets and architecture, just in a very subtle way that when you're driving, you just don't notice some things driving. But when you're on foot, you perceive things and you have a different awareness. So I saw Detroit very differently. Like that race goes across the Ambassador Bridge and then back through the tunnel. So running across the Ambassador Bridge was awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it comes down the waterfront in Windsor. So you're actually running down the waterfront from the other side, looking at Detroit from the boardwalk on the other side of the water. So it just gave me an opportunity to just look at the city and see it, very close up and in detail differently than I ever would have driving around.
Yeah, that's really amazing. I did not know that. That's so cool. And you framed that perfectly. You kind of put me there with your imagery. I like that. Oh,
yeah,
man.
It's a good time. I'm too out of shape to do it again, but I'm glad I did it. That time I did it.
Well, I am so sad that this has finally come to an end, but we're at the end, and you got stuff and I've got stuff and the audience has stuff to do, but we are so glad that you took time out of your busy schedule to talk to us today, to share about your journey and all of your insight and all of your experiences. And we hope that in the future, as things continue to progress with your business, you can come back and visit us again and update us on what's going on. But as for today, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you. And you've made this show that much greater with your contribution.
No, thank you. I had a fantastic time catching up and chatting with you.
Yes, definitely. Well, you have a good one. And everybody come back next week. We'll have another episode ready for you. Detroit Hustle Podcast. Bye.